All right, my name's Tosin. I'm in a band called Animals as Leaders. I'm going to play some Animals as Leaders songs, and then I'll give you guys a chance to ask questions about 8-string guitar, technique, theory, whatever you want, and we'll just have a good time together. Is it possible to get maybe some of the house lights on? Because I literally can't see anybody. I feel all alone in the darkness. Okay. Yeah, no, nothing's happening. Sweet, cool. Hey. All right. I think I'll take some questions at this point. So if anyone wants to know anything, feel free. We have a shy bunch of guitar players in the room. Over there. I think maybe there's a mic that will come to you. Is that true? I don't know who has the mic.
Sorry, I'm just talking to someone amazing here.
Who?
Like, when you write your music, do you like get like heavily involved in music theory, or just like do you just like play something just like if it comes to you, like
Okay, I'm not the type of composer who sits down with maybe like a concept like I'm gonna work in A minor today and then force myself to write in that context. I literally just get on the guitar and start noodling around, and sometimes nothing happens, but sometimes something inspired happens. And then that's when I feel like a song is born. And from there I might use music theory to kind of direct that initial idea to somewhere. But I think what you'll find is that there's a part of your creative process that isn't going to be as intellectual. I know you're in school here and you're learning about all of this information, but there's a part of you musically that just creates from this expressive standpoint. So I think some of the intellectual information starts to just seep into the more intuitive part of you the longer you have that information. So when I was at AIMM, there was all these new concepts. I didn't necessarily see them in my playing, but fast forward 5 years, there's concepts that I've just absorbed in a way that I didn't initially. So to answer your question, theory obviously plays a role because it's changed the way I've interpreted music. Like, I know the impact of certain intervals against a chord, and I know rhythmically if I double the pace of a groove, even if it's at the same BPM, it'll create a sense of urgency. So yeah, there is theory, but I still operate from a purely sort of inspirational or like a raw inspirational standpoint first, and then I'll use theory if necessary to guide that idea into something cooler. Hopefully that helps.
Who's next? Hey, could you explain your playback setup and all the different sort of pieces of your rig right now?
Okay. This is like a really random rig, just because, I don't know, I'm not on tour, so that would be probably my more direct.
So, could you explain that then?
My tour rig, okay, well, the fractal is at the center of my tone. It's the amp simulator as well as the effects processor. It's this thing right here. Right now you see me using a cab and a head just for my stage monitoring. It's not mic'd. What you're hearing is the direct signal from the fractal. And then we just have the tracks going into front of house, and the engineer in front of house is just blending my signal with the track. So I'm pretty much like a fractal guy. I don't really have many outboard pedals. I have a MIDI controller here. You see a huge pedal board. I'm only using the looper from it. It's Vitaly's pedal board. So yeah, disregard most of what you see up here. Unless you're really into pedals, then you can come take a look after the play. Hopefully that helps.
Hey, I'm sitting next to the other dude. Up here, my hands up. Hey,
Yeah, sure.
You were talking about when you're writing in an inspirational place. I know you do a lot of loops, but do you find yourself writing more like lead lines and then voicing fancy chords over them, or a lot of chords and then find a lead line within it?
It depends. Like songs like On Impulse. I was actually working on hybrid picking, and I just wanted to make major scale lines that worked over a major chord. so that's a song where the single note line came before the choral elements of it. And when I wanted to add harmony to that single note line, I started to do a thing that I learned here, where I took that A major single note line, but I imposed it against F minor. You get this sound? I'm just using the relative major of F minor. So you get this sound. So you can get all those extensions like the 9 and 11 and stuff like that. So that changed the tonality of that single note line and gave it a darker feel, and I thought that was cool. But for the most part, I think I have chords first, and then I try to conceive of the single note lines after that. But there really is no default way that I do it. I guess another example would be kind of a rhythmic chordal idea in 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I would loop this for a while, and then I would start to mess around with single notes against the chord. So that's kind of a good example of how I go about writing, where I have a single idea and I'll loop it and I'll try to stack layers on top of it. So if I start with a chordal layer, then the next obvious step would be to use a single note line to either outline the harmony or to create a melody on top of the harmony, and then I'll usually do something rhythmic or something in lower register just to fill out the spectrum. But yeah, from there we would put it into the computer and try to sequence out an actual song, but a lot of it is born just from jamming with myself, I guess, in a way. So I can only speak for myself as a composer, but I find that it's nice to have a diverse range of songs. Like, you don't want to sound formulaic. If you write your songs the same way every time, the result might be too similar, and eventually you'll have a body of work that's all kind of like structured the same way or is coming from the same place. So for me, I really like the idea of just not having a game plan. Ultimately, I will sound like myself, but I like to just start off without any game plan and see what happens. So hopefully that helps. I'll do one more question and then I'll play a song.
Hey, Tosin. In a lot of your songs, you have a bunch of odd rhythms and sound signatures. About the rhythms, how do you go about creating those? Do you just, kind of randomly just tap your foot for when you want to, hit that rhythm, or do they just play in your head? Like, could you explain that for me?
Yeah, okay, the odd rhythm, odd meter thing. A lot of it's syncopation, a lot of it is odd meter syncopation. Some of it is polymetric, but rarely. I think it comes from a diet of listening to progressive music and music that actually already has these sort of time signatures, odd time signatures in it. It's funny because when I was here, there was an odd metered performance class where there was these songs that I consider pop songs, like The Police and stuff like that, that were odd metered, but like they were done so well that it's almost like they wrote it in 5, but they didn't want anyone to know, you know? We don't really do that. Maybe we want you to know. It can be as simple as having a phrase and dropping a beat or adding a beat. It's one of those things where it's an intuitive thing for me. I guess I've gravitated towards phrases that are odd in length. So I don't really have like a formulaic way of doing it, but we fall into we'll do certain things consistently. Like maybe I'll have a cycle of 5 eighth notes, but then the drums will be playing in a 4/4 meter where the snare placement is always on 3. So you're hearing like sort of an ISO rhythm, you know? I'll give you an example. That sort of thing. Sorry if that was really annoying. But, it's kind of like the gent approach to composition where you can get away with creating a 4/4 feel, even though underneath that might be an odd metered 8th note bass phrase. So that's kind of my approach to it. You can find it there's certain types of world music that's, there's Malian music, there's some Afro-Cuban stuff that's polymeter, there's Indian classical music, they use a lot of 9s, a lot of just things that you never really find readily in Western music. So I think those are really cool sources for it, and then there's obviously progressive metal. So if you listen to this stuff a lot, it starts to just come out in your playing. So I think that'd be a good approach to getting into it. Yeah, no problem. All right, I'll do another song. do some more questions. We've got a few.
Howdy. I saw a YouTube video, I guess you posted of you messing with a 9-string, and I just wanted to hear your thoughts on it, I guess.
My thoughts on the 9-string. It has more strings than the 8-string. And more strings than the 7-string. It's cool. I don't know. It's an extended range guitar beyond the extended range guitar. I mean, obviously you could have a 10-string guitar, so it's kind of just like, how much range do you want? You know, you could use that for an upper string, maybe a high A, or what I did is I had a low C sharp. So it's almost like if you took a 5-string bass, I would have that low note. I was already composing with guitars that went that low, but they were 8-string guitars that had like baritone extended scale. The 9-string I thought wasn't really interested, and then Ibanez basically gave me one, and I wrote some stuff with it. But my band is kind of not into it because it's one more guitar we have to have no matter where we go. So I don't know if we'll end up using it. But honestly, on the new album, there's a potential that you'll hear some of that stuff. We'll see.
Cool, thank you.
Hey Tosin, this kind of goes back to the song you just played, Lippincott, as well as the first question, which sort of asked how theory influences you. And from what I can tell from your answer, you were saying it's sort of intuitive, and you have a theory, it's like a toolbox, you just sort of pull from it naturally. But I want to kind of ask you a more in-depth question about a certain aspect of that. I'm super into like parsimonious progressions, really like the Twilight, really dramatic tonal stuff like you saw in the late Romantic period. And I hear some of that in Lippincott, in like the minor tapping passages. It sounds like you're using minor chromatic third stuff. And I was wondering, I was also told by someone who talked to you that you wrote more of the first Periphery album than a lot of people know. So if you were involved in writing letter snips at all, I want to like debunk this rumor or confirm it right now.
It's a conspiracy theory.
Okay, so that's not true?
I had nothing to do with the first Periphery album.
Okay.
Misha had a lot to do with the first Animals album.
Like, tell me what inspires,
some of
that being part of your toolbox, those kinds of progressions.
Funny enough, I'm glad you asked that, because that song Lippincott is an example of where I had no inspiration, so I went on the internet and I was just looking for stuff to learn, and I discovered this guy, Tom Lippincott, who had all these master classes, and he's an 8-string guitarist. He tunes his guitar with a high A. And he had these in-depth harmony courses, and one of them was talking about the harmonic major scale, which is a really cool scale, and I ended up taking from that the augmented scale. So when you mentioned Twilight sort of thing, I think oftentimes that's perceived as like a whole tone.
I was hearing like some minor chords that aren't in the same key, but like their roots are a third apart. That's kind of what I'm hearing.
Oh, actually, what I'm doing is it's like a symmetrical scale. So like
Debussy or something.
No, well maybe, I don't know. I don't really listen to him.
It's fine.
But basically, I'm doing a series of intervals. So there's a half step, and then a minor third between the half step. So you have so you get this really, against a static note, I think it sounds really cool. So it's symmetry, which is cool. And then if you use arpeggios, so I really like that tonality. I don't know, because you're kind of lost in space with that, right?
Exactly.
So yeah, what's interesting is I kind of balance that out with a Lydian sound, like the. go to. To kind of shake up the sort of harmonic comfort of it, you know? So there's a bit of tension and release. And symmetrical scales, whether they're diminished or this augmented thing, really lend themselves to discomfort. But I think the ear is aware of the symmetry, so that also is kind of cool too. So yeah, I'm just into augmented major triads apparently, and it's nice when you can sneak that into a context that isn't, because I think oftentimes when we find a tonality we like, we might try to compose a whole song that the vibe is centered around that, as opposed to using it as a contrast. We kind of alert to make the whole song that vibe. But what's I think more impactful is to incorporate it as like a use of harmonic tension, and then to alleviate that with some sort of harmonic release.
That's actually what I prefer to do too, so that's cool.
Yeah, like on Impulse is another. So you have that chord there. Another example. You have an augmented major triad kind of sequenced in intervals of thirds ascending, and then it just, I think that order, that symmetry, that sort of pattern-based phrasing at times can be a really cool sort of tool for just impact. So yeah, I do that often. But I'm still being intuitive, I guess. Like I just said a lot of stuff that sounded kind of fancy, but like you have to have intuition to place these things in the right places, to create a release, to create tension. There's an art to it also. Never forget, like, as strange as the tonality may be, I wouldn't start composing to it until I've internalized it to a degree, and then felt comfortable with like throwing it in there like a tuna fish flavored ice cream or something, you know? Like. Anyway, we have any other questions?
Hey man, so you obviously do a lot of like 8-finger tapping stuff. What artist or like anything, what was it that like inspired you to really add that to your playing style? Like what kind of brought you into the whole like tapping thing?
Tapping, there was a bass player named Evan Brewer who I was in a band with, but he studied with Reggie Wooten, who, as far as I'm aware, kind of really expanded upon tapping. And bringing it into like a chordal context as opposed to like single note, like you could start to do things like, one of the first things he showed me was to take a chord, and then you could use it as like I call it like a melodic capo, you know? So the chord stays static and you tap notes. And you release those tap notes against the chord. And this gets you into using more than one finger on your right hand, which is another breakthrough as far as tapping is concerned.
Yeah, the other thing I wanted to ask you is, how long did it really take you to like sync up all your fingers and like get good at that? I mean, because I'm trying to like sort of work on trying to like start doing some of that stuff, but I don't have like the syncopation and the my hands don't feel synced together enough to like, you know what I mean? Like try to like,
yeah, they won't until they do. It's just one of those things.
Did it take you a while? Or?
Maybe, I don't know. No, probably not. I think one of my tools for learning techniques is composing with them, because instead of learning a phrase that someone else made, from their brain that you're having to shift your mechanics to, you could come up with something that is intuitive because you made it up, and you're also flexing your compositional muscle, and you're also forcing yourself to use the technique in a musical context. So that's why I would do things. I would take tapping and I'd try to make my own tapping riffs, and I would just write something within my. Obviously, I can't compose something that I can't play. So whatever I created would be within the realm of what I could play. And then as I got better at it, you know, those little etudes or whatever would make me better and more confident tapping, and then my abilities would grow from there. But it's a really intuitive technique. Like, I can't reduce it beyond literally like poking the note you want to hear. So at that point, you just gotta, you know, be honest with yourself. Maybe I would isolate things like making sure the attack of your right hand isn't any less audible than like your left hand, right? So making sure there's an even volume. So you want left and right to sound even. If you were to close your eyes, you wouldn't be able to discern the difference between each hand. And then maybe practicing things at a slower tempo, you know, and trying things like sustaining the note on your right hand until your left hand comes in. So there's no audible pause in the, just these little tricks can help you, but honestly, I think you'll get better at it just from doing it more.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Right on.
I think,
Who are some of your inspirations for guitar?
Geez. A few, I mean, it changes over the years. I was really into the shred stuff, so Yngwie Malmsteen was the first guitar player that I was literally like, what the fuck is happening? And I think it was because it was classical music. Like, I think, well, it's all harmonic minor, but basically my brain was like, whoa, this sounds like classical music, but played really fast through like a full stack. And I thought that intersection was really cool. And I'd never heard such speed so clean. So then that set me on this whole journey of discovering other shred guitar players. So Paul Gilbert was another new shredder that I was into, and then Richie Kotzen, Frank Ambali, Greg Howe. I think these are just the dudes that everyone is into who is into this stuff. And then you start to like, maybe you don't like Vinnie Moore as much as you like Steve Morris. And you know, these things start to, but for me, that was a period of my playing. And then coming to school, definitely, like, I started to really desire more melodically interesting things. So some of these players from the shred category didn't do it for me anymore because they're really kind of in a narrow range of harmony. I remember getting into guys like Kurt Rosenwinkel when I was going to class here, and he's an amazing jazz guitar player. Adam Rogers, Alan Holdsworth. And so these are people who not only have chops, but they're utilizing harmony that's really expansive, you know, which is really stimulating. So I think that's where I am now. Now I'm listening to guys like Eric Gales and Isaiah Sharkey and like Derek Trucks and Jimmy Herring and stuff like that.
Yes.
I really like guitar players that sound vocal almost, you know? So it's funny, when I was going here, they're like, oh, you play really fast. Well, at some point you won't want to play really fast. And it's like kind of a thing that like older dudes say to younger dudes, you know? But they were totally right.
The school took the shred out of you.
Well, you just realize it's like, why are you letting all those notes fly by so quickly? Are they? This is ironic that I'm up here saying this, actually. There's an effect to a lot of notes played at this, like a barrage of notes. There's an effect to it, but then there's something to be said about using as few notes as possible, or like how the quality of each note. So no matter what your style is here, just try to be open to like all the stuff coming at you, because you definitely change as a player and as a person, and then you might as well just be open to the fact that you will change, you know?
Sweet.
Yeah. All right, one more question, I'll play a song.
Yeah, whoever here was making the noises. Somebody was like squeaking around.
Hello. So moving from a 6-string guitar to a 7-string guitar with an extended scale, I noticed that my left hand was hurting really badly. Doing some of the bigger chords and stuff, the craziness. Do you have any exercise, like hand stretches or exercises that you do before
Like
the show?
hand yoga?
Hand yoga, yeah, essentially.
No.
No, you just go at it, drink a bunch of water.
You know what's funny? My first 8-string had a 30-inch neck on it, so it's probably about that long.
Yeah.
And all the first album material was, any 8-string song was written on this beast of a 30-inch neck guitar. And it changed the way I played. I didn't do any bends really, and there's certain things it discouraged because it was so big. I think ultimately your problem will be alleviated because the prominence of fan fret guitars will be more like readily available, so you don't have to fight. So basically it'll be a guitar neck that at one end of the scale is as long as a 27-inch neck, but then at the treble end you'll have a conventional scale length, like 25.5 inches.
Yeah, the Ibanez just put out an Iron Label one. I actually got to play one of those. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, if you're not good with that, then I think your hand's just gonna hurt, basically.
Yeah.
But I think pain is something to be aware of and definitely something to avoid. So if you're,
for sure.
Yeah, because you don't want to end up with like carpal tunnel or tendonitis or anything like that.
And then one more quick question. I've been curious about this for a while, and I've been seeing a bunch of weird information on the internet. But on the Joy of Motion, is it all the fractal, or did you guys use real amps?
It's all the fractal, but it's a tone match of a real amp.
Okay.
So we made our own IRs.
So like it's essentially the same deal going on with the new Periphery albums. You just tone match something with the XX2, and then that was it.
I guess so.
Works, so.
Yeah, I think that's. I don't know what they did exactly, but yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. All right. More music. do some more questions.
What's up?
What's up?
Okay, so is there anything or anybody outside of music that inspires you? And how do you stay fit during tour?
Okay, inspiration outside of music. Yeah, there's a ton. I don't know. Bernie Sanders? Yeah, I mean, I'm into fashion. I'm into like cars. Cars inspire me. Fast cars. Design in general. I think for anyone who's like creative or super intelligent shows us like what's capable, and it's nice to have examples of things that are beautiful or amazing. You know, it shows us that as people we're capable of so much more. So yeah, inspiration's everywhere. And then staying fit on tour, I lift the weights and I eat the food. Do it regularly.
I just want to know if it was possible, like without gassing out.
Yeah, I mean, if your lifestyle incorporates like activity, then yeah, it would be abnormal for you to not be active. And for me, when I'm not on tour, I work out. So when I go on tour, to feel normal, I have to, you know? It can be weird. I could be working out while the, direct support band is sound checking and I'm like doing burpees or something. But it is what it is, you know? You need to, going on tour can be like a really tough thing just to stay healthy, and so it's good to keep these habits so that you don't burn out on tour, you know? So,
okay, cool.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hey.
How much do you think having like a healthy diet and like staying fit can help your creativity? Or just help you as a musician?
I don't know. I feel like a life coach or something.
Or do you even eat because you're like a robot?
I sustained myself off of the reception from your cell phones, actually. I think that stuff is holistically beneficial. So yeah, like if you feel healthy, you're going to be inspired to write, and you're going to feel good about playing because you just feel good as a human, and you know what I mean? So yeah, stay in school, be healthy.
Hey, Tosin.
Hey.
I think we all want to know about your slap technique.
Cool.
That's mind-blowing. So when did it start for you? Why did you incorporate slap on your guitar? And what is the technique? How is it working?
Okay. Basically, the slap technique is another Victor Wooten thing, or Reggie Wooten, whoever you want to. But it's an extension of traditional funk bass slap. The main difference being I'm getting a down and an upstroke as opposed to a single percussive hit. So you have a... So I'm kind of striking through the string and coming back up. And then the technique sort of takes off when you start to incorporate your other fingers. So a group of three would be 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. It's all on the same string. So. Like that. Then you can add your middle finger. You can do groups of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And obviously you could add your ring finger in groups of, you could do groups of 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. seems like you're almost raking, or like I'm like tearing my fingers off of the string, you know? Like in a row, like a zipper or something, you know? But I compose a lot with this. Once you start to add hammer-ons and stuff like that, you can get some cool results. Like, especially if you start to go into the sort of upper register and more melodic territory. So at that point, I'm plucking certain strings, hammering on certain notes, hammer-ons out of nowhere, and I'm completing the phrase with my thumb. So if I took like an A major or A minor triad, I get it. So it's kind of, at this point, becoming a combination of hammer-ons, plucks, and thumps, you know? But I really like this technique, especially as a melodic tool, just because it doesn't quite sound like an electric guitar or like what you're used to hearing, you know? So yeah, I guess you would start with simply getting the down and up part of all of it. And then go from there, learn some Animals as Leader songs.
Hey, Tosin.
Hey, wait, where are you?
Right here. Back here. See me?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, cool. So, with the popularity of 7 and 8 string guitars over the past few years, I feel like it's still mostly within a sort of shred metal context. Are there any guys out there who are playing 7, 8, or more string guitars who aren't in this sort of shreddy, proggy realm who you've taken a notice to?
Yeah, actually the first 8-string guitarist outside of the metal genre that I knew of was Charlie Hunter, who kind of does bass and guitar at the same time. That's his stick. There's like he can send he has 2 sets of pickups. One has an output to a bass amp and the other outputs to a guitar amp.
Does he slap on it?
Kind of. He's incredible. It sounds like a walking bass line and a guitarist improvising, or like someone playing a Hammond organ. And dude, yeah, Charlie Hunter is, look him up.
Yeah,
it's a problem. And then there's a guy who went to school here, Josh Martin. He lives in Atlanta.
I've heard that.
Yeah, Little Tybee is his band. He's doing like flamenco techniques and a lot of tapping, and it's all clean guitar. So, and it's 8-string. Yeah, so you should holler at him.
I will. I'll holler.
Yeah. That's good. Do another question. Who's?
Hey, how many hours would you practice in a day, and what would be your practice regimen like if there's one?
I mean, that changes. I mean, I've been playing for like 19 years, so practice regimen. These days, I just work on improvisation. I'll put on like, I've been playing along to like Michael Jackson's Thriller album, actually, strangely enough. I'm just trying to find just really basic melodic or musical context for me to just work on improvising. And then I'll make up chord progressions that are non-diatonic, that have these sort of curveballs that force me to play changes and not rely on staying in one key. So that's kind of what I'm doing now. I'll play as long as I feel like playing, which is at least a few hours.
A few hours, how much would that be?
You want like a specific number?
I just want to get inspired.
I don't know that I like this question this much because I feel like the passionate player basically has to be told to put the instrument down, you know? Like, and I love playing, and so I never looked at the clock. And it kind of, this question alludes to like this idea that there's like a magic number for practice or like a quota that you should hit in order to be good, but like, honestly, not all practice time is created equal. Like, if you're just like playing shit you already know, you're actually not learning anything, you know? So 4 hours of that versus 1 hour of actual intense study on a weakness are totally different. So then a matter of time becomes relative to how the time is spent. So it's kind of hard to answer the question. Luckily for you, here at AIMM, they have a certain amount of hours you gotta hit to get your accreditation. So.
I mean, what I wanted to ask basically was like, would you sit with the guitar for like hours and hours together, or you just, if an idea strikes you, you would come and like take it through and do something with it, or like you would have a daily fixed like a timing, practice timing, or you would just improvise?
Yes.
Okay, thanks so much.
All of the above.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Cool.
Up in the front.
Hello, Tosin. First off, I want to say you're the reason I bought an 8-string guitar, so thank you for the inspiration to get one.
Oh. Did you buy my guitar? That's a no.
Wait, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that one.
No.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, my question to you is, what is your advice for somebody who is trying to learn their way around the neck on an 8-string guitar? Learning how to play those wide chords and all that kind of stuff.
That's a good question. And I think fretboard competency is kind of like a universally valuable thing. And I think they do a good job here at AIMM. Actually, a lot of Steve's classes will get you, because basically you have options with a chord, you know? So like, I would just do things like taking a chord I already know and moving the root down an octave. So now, this E minor 9 sounds like this, and then I could actually play it a full octave below there. And that frees up certain fingers. So I would like sometimes experiment around static notes or deconstruct a chord that I already know. Do like slash chords where it's like a G major 7 with B and the E in the bass. So just experimenting with the notes that are available, utilizing open strings. Specifically to talk about learning the fretboard, I think you should be hyper aware of the fact that there's a ton of repetition in scales. And so being able to know all those notes are the same, you know, just knowing where your octaves are. And then I would practice my scales in certain ways, like I wouldn't just take the major scale and know it from like lowest. I would practice it in intervals of like thirds or fourths or fifths or sixths or sevenths. That way you have, I could call it like the DNA of the scale. And then like within that scale, you have the entire key. So then I would try to learn like each triad. Like that. And then do it in more than one position. I use the cage system, so I do it in 5 different positions. I think that's what they teach here as well. So like, let me break it down even further, because I felt really stupid, but I literally would be like 1, 3, 2, 4, 3, 5, 4, 6, 5, 7, 6, octave. I had to say the intervals out loud while I played them in order to just connect my brain. And then it started to sink in. And it's helpful because this intervallic use of the scale really illuminates a lot of the harmony that can be inside something as boring as the major scale, you know? Well, I don't consider it boring, depends on how you play it. But we, as guitar players, oftentimes want to learn as many scales as possible, and like obscure scales, Hungarian minor scale and all this stuff, and it's like, well, can you make the major scale sound hip, you know? Like, or does it sound like Mary Had a Little Lamb? So I would do stuff like that, like learning set intervals inside the scale, and then you would do it for a minor scale, Dorian, any of the tonalities you really like. Yeah. And then I think there's a lot to be said about experimentation and exploration when it comes to chord construction, because you have so many strings. So like, you know, I would take something as simple as a triad, and then I would start to maybe turn it into a major 7 chord, and then see what it sounds like as like a major 13 chord, or like a stuff like that, where I'm just kind of like moving by scale degrees within a chord just to see what those extensions give me, you know? And then lastly, the thing I do with chords, I mean, this doesn't necessarily pertain to having 8 strings or not, but I like to maybe take a single voicing and then retain a pedal tone, like and then I'll move that voicing around, but always sustaining that one interval. So some of these chords we have some tension, and some of them it sounds like harmonic. And then you can do things where you take that chord and move the third of the half step, and now we have like a major version of the same thing. That's cool because it doesn't adhere to any diatonic rules. It's more of, it just has this sort of progressive sound, you know? And it's experimental, meaning like the result is a consequence of you exploring. You have no real goal in mind other than like exploring how many chords can you fit against this one note, you know? I use it all the time. So yeah, it's cool. I'm using one chord, so I don't need like a ton of chords to create a progression. You can actually use one chord. It's just a matter of where you move it around. So you have a lot of strings on your guitar, explore. And I think your exploration is going to be guided by the things you learn here. So like I said, recognizing patterns. Oh, you know, a scale only goes up 7 degrees until I reach the same note that I started on. And, you know, the interval thing is huge because you realize like, why minor thirds sound a certain way, why augmented fourths or fifths sound a certain way, why, you know, a major third with a minor seventh has a certain sound, you know? All these things are the colors that create the palette of harmony. And once you have a grasp on that, you're more able to create a picture that's deliberate as opposed to, yeah.
Thank you.
So stay in school. All right. Sorry. One more. I'll do one more question.
I just had a question regarding, you kind of made a mention to it, so Michael Jackson tune.
Yeah.
Are there like any other genres that you use, I guess, like to kind of come up with inspiration within your own music? If that question makes sense.
Yeah, there's a ton.
If so, what genres or what bands?
Maybe I haven't really done this before, but maybe I'll like. Okay, hold on. I listen to a lot of electronic music, and I'm also trying to work on my thumping, but in a way that isn't just compositional, maybe more having freedom to improvise with it. So I've been rocking this guy Machine Drum, and I'll like put on one of his tracks, and then I'll just kind of just like do what I'm about to do. Hopefully this doesn't suck. So then it's like, there is a melodic component to that, but there's a fierce rhythmic component to that, and then there's the technical aspect of me just trying to thump the whole time without like falling out of time with that syncopation, but also throwing in these melodic fills. But with thumping, I don't normally play in a scalar way, so then it's forcing me to try to kind of merge these worlds, and in an improvisational context, which I think is like the destination of most musicians, to be able to just get on their instrument and say something without premeditation, you know, like to just be free to, the same way I'm talking right now, just thinking of words and talking, like I feel it'd be amazing to get on my instrument and do the same thing. So yeah, I'll do stuff like that. Obviously it's not metal at all, but I probably could find a place for that facility when I go to write metal music or whatever, so.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah. All right. I think I'm gonna play my last song, but I want to thank you all for coming to my clinic. It's been a while since I've been here, so yeah. This backing track might be a little louder than the ones before, just so you know.